Hello, welcome to Tight Lines. August bank holiday is probably the last chance for a trip to the seaside for a lot of people, so that's where we're off to, in the company of Mike Thrussell. When it comes to all-round sea fishing expertise, there aren't many who come close to Mike, and we'll be delving into several of his arts, especially lure fishing. And that's precisely what Henry Gilby and his mates were doing when we found them in Ireland, where they searched the surf for bass using all things artificial. Bass are also the subject of Andy Ford's report into what many anglers believe is the scandal of very low minimum landing size regulations. In Fishery Focus, I'll have information on what tactics, tackle and baits have been working around the country for all types of anglers. Well, it's always a pleasure to see you, Mike.
It's a pleasure to be back in the
No, I always enjoy your company, and I think we're going to have a good time tonight as well. And what I need to know first of all is where you've been and what you've been catching, because you've usually been catching loads in somewhere nice.
Yeah, well, I think the last time I was in February, and then obviously we had that 3 months of really bad weather. Yeah. It was hard going through that, but of course then we got that good weather in June, and the fishing's really picked up. I was over in Ireland in May. Got a new species, a stingray, which I targeted, number 107. Really pleased with that. And I've had some varied fishing, both boat and shore, and I've been doing okay.
Yeah. One thing, you've got this lovely picture here of a smooth hound, and I've noticed by reading the reports and having a couple of goes myself, it's been a really good year for smoothies.
It's been a cracking year, absolutely stunning, yeah. And that was only last week, believe it or not.
Really?
Not a big fish, but, you know, there's been a lot of big fish around this year.
Yeah.
The guy I was out with up there in Holyhead last week was telling me he's had 6 fish over 20 pounds this year. And big fish.
Fantastic.
In fact, the record's going to go, I think, before long.
We'll have a chat about that a bit later on. But first, Ireland is one of the great European destinations for bass, especially since they've closed the commercial bass fishery and established them as a sports species. Henry Gilby and his pals make the journey across the Irish Sea regularly to tap into fantastic action in some of the most spectacular scenery imaginable.
If anyone ever asks me, you know, what do you look for in bass fishing, I'll say look at the Copper Coast. It's kind of perfect. It's very shallow, it's very rocky, very weedy, there's loads of structure. This to me is kind of where bass fishing is, where it was born. It's kind of archetypal. Bass love it. But because it's so perfect, it also means on the flip side, it can blow. You're kind of waiting like we got here. The wind shifted southwest, it's just starting to fizz up. When the wind gets too strong, it'll blow the water out. The colour comes in, the weed breaks up. But then, because it's Ireland and we've got all these bays, you can go into Dungarvan, you can go into Tramore. There's always a place you can get out of the weather, basically. You know, I'm using hard lure, and that thing will go, let's say, I don't know, 30, 40 centimetres. It'll cast like a bullet, and it'll wobble and roll, slash side to side, all that kind of stuff. But in my box of tricks, I've got the ability to fish so many different methods, like hard lures, you know, surface lures, soft plastics, I can bump things on the bottom. Just trying to find, you know, the fish are here, make no mistake. If we don't catch them, it doesn't mean they're not here. They are here. You meet any bass junkie, and they're going to keep talking about fizz. They're going to talk about life. Now, look at it. This place is fizzing up. You've got the life, you've got the lift on the sea, okay? But you've also got perfect clarity. Being Ireland, there's always the chance of a donkey. You're out here, it's kind of different from where I fish at home. We get cool fishing back in Cornwall, but here, you just see it once, I don't know, however often you come over, you suddenly see someone get hit by a train. And then you need every bit of luck on your side to hit him, hold him around these boulders and land him in this fizz. It's just, this is kind of near perfection. You know as well as I do, okay, fishing can be as simple or as complicated as you want. I mean, you can have endless things that just confuse you, but at heart, the great thing about lure fishing is it's whacking out a lure and cranking it in, especially conditions like this. It's built for hard lures. And I know you can twitch, you can pause, you can suspend, you can stop, you can put bells on it, but at the end of the day, I don't care what anyone says. You're whacking out a hard lure, you're imitating a sand eel, a pollock or a mackerel, and I'm going to crank him. That's it. I'll go fast, I'll go slow. I know if I feel it's shallow, I'll lift the rod tip up, change the angle on the lure, lift him up shallower. I'll hold him down. Some guys will tap him, they'll pause, they'll tap him. A floating lure will float back up, a sinking lure will flutter back down like that. But you're not going to go far wrong. And it's about as hard as you're going to get. But what I've got now, instead of fizz, I've got current. I've got the whole of Dungarvan Bay basically clearing down this channel. But I'm actually going to use it's almost a fly fishing technique. I call it check nymphing with soft plastics. I'm basically going to put plastics like that into the current, and I'm going to use the current to bounce. I'm not going to give it any exaggerated movement. I want to match the weight of my head to the strength of the flow, and he's basically going to trundle down current. And he's going to trundle down. You'll feel every bounce like that, every bounce. And you're waiting, obviously, for fish holding nose into the current. It's so different to fizzed up fishing because it's Ireland and because I've got options. I know I can move with the tide and I've always got a chance of fish.
Fish on.
Oh! Yes! Nice fish?
Yes. Feels a good fish.
East wind, bright sunshine, appalling fishing conditions, but it's Ireland, eh? What pound lead you got on?
20.
I'll bring him in on the weed. Look at this. I mean, I know it looks beautiful on the filming, but it's bright sunshine, east wind. This is nasty, nasty fishing conditions, but look at it. Look at that mouth there. See how those things, people say, oh, you can't use 6-0 hooks, you can't use the big lures and stuff. These things just engulf it. But look how dark he is, or she rather. And you see, sometimes you get those blue tinges on the fins. Look down there, you see? Oh, they're the prettiest things ever, eh? Honestly, these things are an addiction. Nick, you're a beauty, mate. First chuck.
Superb, yeah. First chuck, just bumping it along the sand, waiting for it to come around in the current. Whack. He hit it first time. Now, sometimes on the soft plastics, they tap it first and then come back round. First time, fish on.
Well,
brilliant.
Hooked on.
Amazing.
Yeah, these fish are, in theory, they're stacked up in the current, okay? But obviously, we're about 20 minutes from low water and it's starting to slacken off. I'll be interested to see if we get more fish now. Do you get hit?
He's in.
Oh, you beauty, Jack. Geez, there's some nice fish here, eh? Oh, this is a nice fish, eh? Tail brooch, it's like...
That looks a lovely fish, Jack.
This, mate, I'm telling you, this is a bass of a lifetime. 1, 2... Holy cow, Jack! He's got to be, I don't know what he weighs. He's got to be 9, 10. Honestly, if you said to me 5 years ago, I'd see fish this big, bumping soft plastics in the current, I think I might have had a giggle. When Ireland fires, it's just off the chart.
Fish on.
Fish, guys. Oh, yes, that's brute.
Henry, that's a good fish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tell you, never in a million years will this country cease to amaze me. Back home, east wind, bright sunshine, I just wouldn't be out bassing. But Ireland, I don't know, I know Nick's got this place bad, eh?
Some bass fishing here.
This goes against everything bass fishing's meant to be, but it's electric. The fishing's been off the chart. Look at that, look, this fish is absolutely fine, look. Just kicking, you see, look, I've got the wrist, the tail, wants to go, wants to go, wants to go, wants to go, look at that. I tell you, get it bad, eh? It's like an addiction worse than you can imagine.
If only everyone could enjoy their fishing as much as Henry does. He just loves it.
His enthusiasm is so infectious. He makes you want to go fishing.
He does, yeah.
He's a great lad, Henry.
I like him a lot. We've had him in, several times he's been in here. But when you look at the sort of tackle that's being used, and I'm talking rods and reels and the diameter of the line, and not necessarily the size of the lures, that's semantics, but the thrill and the sporting action of those fish, and I think back to the Leslie Moncrief and on days when bass fishing was 5 ounces of lead and 20-pound line, and all right, you can eventually feel them, but it's nothing like that, is it?
No, it's come a long, long way now.
Yeah.
It is so light, so sporting, and it's dramatic fishing because you're feeling the fish.
Yeah.
It's not just you watch the take. That's awesome in itself. But to actually fight the fish on the light tackle, you feel every single movement when they dive, when they turn, when they shake their head, fantastic fishing.
And we've come to it really quite late because it was only a couple of years ago I realised how manic French anglers were about this kind of bass fishing, and Dutch and Belgian anglers love it too. They're really into this. Slightly longer rods than us, probably 10 or 11 foot rods, but really soft, light action, light fixable reels.
That's right. I reckon they're 3 to 4 years in front of us.
Yeah.
And they're adapting their tackle much, much quicker than we are. Having said that, we've got our own sort of set of circumstances, but we need to learn off them because they are a long way in front.
And the Japanese as well.
Oh, well, absolutely.
Some of the Japanese customised tackle, when you see some of the hand-painted reels and the customised rods and the designs, cost miles more to paint the flipping thing than to make it in the first place.
Exactly. There's one thing too about, sort of lure bass tackle. A lot of people think it's very expensive, and it's a bit elitist. It's not at all.
No.
There's some really good quality kit at very, very low prices, which will more than do the job. So somebody who wants to start, it's not expensive to get into.
The other great thing as well, of course, with that kind of tackle, and I've got some of it, you can use it for perch, you can use it for pike, you can use it, say it quietly, you can use it for carp and zander and all sorts of other fish on little tiny imitation baits. It's great value.
You can take it offshore and fish for bream and all sorts of small stuff too, It's really versatile tackle,
Welcome back. I'm in the company of top sea angler, journalist and writer Mike Thrussell. There's lots of pats on the back for you there. And you've got angler candy here, haven't you? This is...
Yeah, it's a sweet shop.
It's flies, it's floats, and now it's lures.
Yeah.
And you want them all.
You do.
I don't know how many hundreds I've got, to be fair, and some of them will never, ever see wet stuff.
I'm guilty as charged too.
You've got to have them, haven't you?
Yeah, you have. You have.
But these are all specific things for specific reasons.
For me, some of these, these are the ones that I tend to carry all the time. They catch me fish. Lots of different types. I mean, Henry made reference to the size, how big a lure a bass will take. But also, I like to have smaller ones with me because quite often, particularly in those conditions that Henry was fishing, it's calm and it's clear. Quite often, I find the smaller lures catch better than the big ones, and you work them a bit slower. And because the fish are feeling a bit lethargic, just like us in hot weather.
Yeah.
So it's always worth having these smaller ones, little ones like
what
this.
What you're saying is you want to use an ice cream instead of a lump of steak.
You got it.
Exactly right, yeah. That's one of Roy Marlowe's expressions. You've probably heard him use it loads of times. You give him an ice cream rather than a lump of steak. And these little sort of crankbait type lures, what we'll do, let's just discuss the shape of this and how it works. First of all, you've got this semi-see-through body with, you can see this ball in here. Can you see it there? Look. Now that rattles. Hear it rattling, and that is attractive in itself.
I find it's really important. I find that I'm pretty meticulous. I keep sort of notes of all my catches and what works, what doesn't work. And I'm finding that anything with noise for me catches more fish than a plain lure. It depends how much action you put into the lure, but that ball bearing makes a difference.
I should catch loads in because I'm really noisy. This has also got this very interesting front end. I call these chuggers. These sort of chugger lures that push water along the front with them.
That's right. What you can do, they're actually sort of for walking the dog, what we call walking the dog, which means you can make them, have that lazy surface action. But if you give them a flick with your wrist, they'll dig the nose in. And that little cup nose, they start to pop. And if you work them a little bit quicker, also you can make them make a wake. And wakes can be deadly when you're fishing for bass, particularly in shallow water. They go bananas for.
Well, a very kind viewer made me a couple of lures. I'm going to
You're looking at those, yeah.
That's all you're going to do as well. You're not going to be taking... Look, special. And that's got this same type of nose that fish on the surface or just under the surface make a lot of disturbance, and as you say, it will do that undulating movement through the water. And I've got these especially to try and catch tuna on when I'm abroad. But they'll catch bass and they'll catch pike as well.
Absolutely right.
I'm gonna have some
you
fun
see,
with those.
that one is one of my favourites. I do really well on this. But look how deep that cup nose is. That really pops.
Wow.
If you really give it a flick with your wrist, if you wind in a couple, give it a flick with your wrist, the nose digs in and it literally goes pop.
Yeah.
And once you start to work it fast, it starts to spray water in front as well. And it's all that noise, because once that water starts to spray in front of it sounds like bait fish being attacked or splattering on the surface when they got big fish underneath them. So effective. So effective.
These are hard baits and crank baits. There's so many different names these days. But you've got a couple of soft baits in with you as well. And these shad type of lures, you can see there, you can see the weight inside there. So that'll hang like that in the water. Now, you can fish these almost any way, can't you? You can retrieve them, you can bounce them, hop them, as they describe it.
Just like Henry was doing when he was saying about you cast up tide and you bring it round by lifting the rod, you know, and it's literally doing that. And it's a natural swimming action. And also, if you look at that, it's got a flat base, flat belly to it, so you can literally hop them, as you say. They're effective both over clean ground, but particularly over rough ground.
Yeah, and the hook on the top, so you don't snag up very easily.
Yeah.
And if you do, a really good tip someone showed me is to just twang the line. The number of times that twanging
can
just releases it, make it slightly different
That's
angle.
right.
The other thing is with these paddle tails as well. See, where you get that big paddle tail, you can actually feel those when you're fishing braid, light rods. You can feel that swimming.
That's right.
And you know if you can feel it swimming, the fish can
does
sit.
that on the line. You can feel it thumbing away.
Really vibrating, So that's another type of lure. And here's sort of a variation on that theme. Now, this looks quite different to me, because here you've got sort of the lip that you'd normally have on a plug.
That's right. It's called a piccolo, and what it does, as you work it, it comes up, and then obviously the nose takes it down. So it's this, you get back to it all the time, it's this natural action. And you'll find that when the fish come in and take a lure, it's 9 times out of 10, it's on the drop. Because they think the bait fish is trying to get away and hide, and it's last chance saloon. Exactly. They go for it.
Now, I'm just looking at the sort of the business end of this, if you like. This see-through, almost like just a plain piece of jelly on the end. Why is that so effective, do you think?
It's effective when the water's very clear and when you've got sunlight on the water, etc., because you're getting refraction of light through that body. And what fish are looking for, particularly in those sort of conditions, they're looking for flashes. They're looking for light reflecting off scales, as well as listening through the lateral line and using the scent abilities. You know, it's really important that you give the fish exactly what they're looking for. And that's why we're finding that these clear lures, you know, they reflect light so well. You can see through it.
There you go,
And it looks very natural in the water.
Back to this this clear one here. This whippy tail, how does that work in the water? Is that going to vibrate as much as the paddle tail?
No, it doesn't vibrate at all. But what it's doing, it looks like a sand eel. If you think of a sand eel, when a sand eel swims, although, yes, you can see it swim, it's not got a wild action.
No.
It's quite a slim through the water action. And that's exactly what that's representing.
Now, this one, anybody that's ever had the misfortune to catch a weaver, to me, that's exactly what that looks like. And I've never seen so many weaver as I caught. A couple of years ago, we were trying to catch sand eels out on the Varn, and it was 2 sand eels, 3 weavers on the Sabikis.
They can be really thick on the ground.
So many
weavers,
of them. Do fish eat them?
Oh, yeah, no problem at all. What you'll find is that if ever you're offshore and you find a sandbank that you've got an awful lot of lesser weavers on, I guarantee it'll be a really good blonde ray mark.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, with this, you can fish these as well several different ways, can't you? Because you tell me.
You can fish them on a free-flowing trace with sort of a 3-way swivel and a small bomb, and just cast them out and retrieve them like you would normally with any artificial sand eel or shad. But those I like because they're quite thick in the body. They go really well with a small jig head, something about 1/4 ounce, 1/2 ounce. Again, flick it out and just bounce it back. Incredibly effective because of that paddle tail. If you look at the tail is actually segmented, and it gives it a lot more movement.
You see those segments there, yeah. Well, they're almost articulated, isn't it? Yeah.
And it's representative of an awful lot of things. I mean, loosely it represents a sand eel, but also it's a small bait fish. You know, it represents everything.
I've just, if it's possible, I've just done a very, very loud smile there because you were talking about 1/4 ounce and 1/2 ounce jig heads. Now, who would have thought, even 10 years ago, you'd have been talking about that very much in sea fishing terms.
Well, we're able to do it because of the modern braids and the new nanofill line, you know, that type of thing. I mean, the ability now to fish very, very light, but have maximum sensitivity. But also, you've still got casting ability because the lines have come on so much. They're smoother, they cast better, and they're so thin for the breaking strain. Massive difference.
The other thing I love about it as well, we're still learning because we've just sat in here looking at one of my little computerised tablet, and we've learned a new knot, haven't we? We've learned the GT knot, and we're going to try the GT knot because it looks, you know, one of the biggest problems of all is tying braid to mono or fluorocarbon and getting a lovely small neat transition between the very thinner line of the braid and the thicker line of the mono, and we think that the GT knot, much less complicated than the FG knot, which, yeah, is a disaster knot for me, but the GT knot could well be going into my knot armoury. Anyway, bit of sea fishing, and as ever, our guest has chosen his speciality subjects, and you've gone for the South Wales coast, Mike. Why is that particular region working well for you?
Particularly this time of year, it'll fish really well. Also, there's an awful lot of people down there on holiday, so, you know, they can maximise their sport there. A lot to go for.
As far as holiday anglers go, I suppose mackerel are going to be the target species. You can catch them on anything.
That's one reason why I picked it, because they can go for the mackerel, they can go for the pollock, and they can go for the garfish on the feathers and the floats. They'll do really well. But also, if there's guys down there with a family or more experienced anglers, those rocks can produce some really good fishing in the dark, particularly huss, conger, etc. It's a really good area. And you've also got bass on the beaches too. And if you look for them, small-eyed ray.
Really?
Yeah.
We've had some pretty big tides this week. Are they going to? They're ebbing off now over the.
They're ebbing off now. Yeah. You're going to be coming onto smaller tides, but it'll still fish pretty well.
Good. You mentioned a couple of species there, and there's some lovely pictures here. I mean, that's obviously not a shore-caught fish unless you caught it off the shore and then put it on a boat for the picture. That's a nice eel. That's a good condition eel, that one, isn't it?
Yeah, estimated about 40 pounds, probably a bit over, but I had it on 12-pound class tackle, and it was off an inshore, and I mean an inshore wreck, because we had a really snotty day. And I think the light tackle made the difference, because there were a lot of smaller eels caught, but that was the only really big one. And,
really?
You know, sometimes those big eels, they're really sort of tetchy with you. They play around with you. Light tackle can help.
Well, I remember I went out with the Junior Conger Club a few years ago, and they said the most noticeable difference in conger fishing now to then was then you got odd, huge eels. Yep. Now you get lots of straps and lots of smaller eels, and that's because of catch and release. It's meant the bigger eels haven't got the amount of food there to grow bigger. You subscribe to that theory?
Yes, I do to some extent. I think the more stick a bit of ground gets, that tends to be what happens, you know. But if you can, there are areas like inshore wrecks, I think, are ignored, and there are some very big fish on those. What you've got to do is you've got to fish for them, and that's what most people don't. If you fish for them, sooner or later you'll get one out, and you might get surprised.
What's your timing tide-wise? Because wrecks are great because you can fish them right through the tide, can't you? Are you a slack water conger man?
Yeah, I like slack water, but also just on the turn of the flood, that first hour, but particularly that first sort of half an hour, you can get some very big fish moving then. They're very lazy, that's why they're big. Yeah. You know, and they don't want to have to work too hard. Once the tide starts to flow, they're a bit more reluctant to come out and feed. So, yeah, I like slack water in that first little bit of the flood. I'll
tell you what I like. I like that picture of that bull huss.
I say to myself, it's a stunning-looking huss, isn't it? Beautiful.
Glorious-looking fish. You can see why they are very similar to these are called leopard sharks off the California coast, can't you? That really has got proper leopard markings. Beautiful. Was the water coloured there? Because it's not got that normal sort of bronzy sheen they get.
What it is, it's ground that's adjacent. It's like mixed ground. It's adjacent to rough, but the huss will roam around, and when they're on the sand, they take on that sort of very pale colour. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. A lot of huss around too this year, and some big ones.
Are there? Yeah, I've noticed. I've not caught any myself, but as you say, I noticed.
A lot of 15-pound, 16-pound fish. That's a big huss.
They're worthy opponents.
They certainly are. Yeah, they do scrap a bit. Yeah.
And I thought when I saw it, just a passing glance, well, that's a small cod to have a picture of, and of course, it's a blooming great, well, a fairly big whiting.
Yeah, I mean, whiting, obviously, like everybody, I've caught thousands of them, but I've never done well with big whiting anywhere for some reason. And that, for me, is a PB. It weighed £2.10. I caught it off Plymouth, yeah. So, you know, it's not a big PB by other people's standards, but for me, it's the best I've done. And it was nice to see so many big whiting, you know, sort of over £2 down there. There's a lot of them.
And was it 107 species now?
107, yeah. I've been chasing a stingray for a long time, and I was in Kerry in Ireland, in the west of Ireland, back in May, and lucky I got my stingray of £15, so I was really pleased.
That's got fantastic colour.
Oh, beautiful, well. Yeah. They've got like this black velvet colouring on them, but underneath they get this like bronzy colour. Yeah. Absolutely beautiful. But there were 2 other fish caught that week, one of 40 pounds and one of 50 pounds.
Wow.
The 50 pounder officially weighed. That's a big lump of stingray.
And it's strange because that ground around Clacton, St Osyth, is famous for these huge stingrays. There's a couple of areas in Wales as well that are famous. These fairly barren, sandy marks at the right time of year. They produce these dinner table type.
What you usually find with stingray is that they're actually, when you catch them on the beaches, they're actually in transit, usually heading for an estuary.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, the theory is that they breed in the estuaries, and they probably do. But that's usually what's happening. They're usually heading for sort of a little bit of mix between saltwater and freshwater, which is what they like to breed in.
Now, you've bought a rig in that we haven't really got time to look at today, but you emphasised the lightness of it and the invisibility of it. Why are you into that at the moment?
It's just something that I've been asked about by a lot of people. Because we've had such nice weather and the seas have been relatively calm and very, very clear, people that are fishing over shallow reefs, etc., have been struggling with normal tactics. And competition anglers have been doing it for a long time. Basically, in a nutshell, what you do is you fine your gear right down. You make a rig out of 20-pound fluorocarbon and you use clear 2 crossway beads.
But we've got to leave it there, but it's keep it light is the message.
Keep it light, keep it unseen if you can, yeah.
And that's all for today, but don't forget you can find all sorts of features from the show on the website and keep in touch here via email and on Twitter. Thanks, Mike, for coming in today. It's been great to see you, mate. River fishing is the focus next Friday when I'll be joined by top specialist angler Duncan Charm. And also on the show, we had a great day barbel fishing with Dr Paul Garner on the River Severn. Join us, 6:30, Sky Sports 4. And it's goodbye for now. Have a great week out there. Tight lines. Cheers, mate.
Yeah, great. Really enjoyed it.
Watch all 6 Sky Sports channels on your mobile and online.